owners of Southampton, Virginia. He enlists the help of 4 fellow slaves, and he plans this rebellion for July 4th, 1831. Well, that sounded good, but the rebellion actually didn't happen until August 22nd because Turner fell ill and couldn't do the rebellion on the date he had planned. So the rebellion actually occurs on August 22nd of 1831 because Turner had fallen ill and could not complete his mission on July 4th. Well, as you can imagine, Turner started out with just the 4 trusted fellow slaves, but his numbers grew to more than 70, both free and enslaved blacks who joined the cause. More than 70 it snowballed into. And basically what these rebel slaves did is they traveled from house to house, freeing slaves and killing all the white people they encountered. They just went from house to house, freeing all the slaves and killing any white people they encountered. They have muskets and firearms, do you think? No. So what did they use to kill these people? Knives, hatchets, axes, blunt instruments, anything they could find that would do damage, because they had no muskets. They had no firearms of any kind. They were too difficult to collect. So they used knives, hatchets, axes, any blunt instrument they could get their hand on. And Turner told his group to kill all white people, and they would spare almost no one. They would spare almost no one, which meant they were killing men, women, and children. And it was estimated, I said between 55 and 65, so we'll go with 60. Nobody knows for sure, but it was estimated that Turner's group killed 60 white men, women, and children. What do you think happened in Virginia? What came to the aid of these white people that were being killed? The Virginia militia. And finally, Turner and his rebels were confronted by this white Virginia militia, who obviously had about twice or 3 times their numbers. So finally, the Virginia militia gets involved, and they have a standoff. And Turner and his rebels are defeated by the militia. And within a day of that defeat, the state of Virginia executed 56 blacks, and at least another 100 were simply killed. I bet all of them weren't part of Turner's group, but they were going to pay the price. So within a day of Turner's defeat, the state of Virginia executed 56 blacks, and at least another 100 were killed. Most of these black casualties weren't even involved in the rebellion. Yeah. So within a day of this suppression of the rebellion, the state of Virginia executed 56 blacks and killed at least 100 others in battle. Most of these black casualties were not even involved in the rebellion. They were innocent bystanders. So what's the fear of Turner's rebellion do? How does it affect blacks? What's happening? What are all these white people doing anytime they see a black person? Killing them. And it got so bad that a military general finally had to order all of his troops and all white citizens to stop killing black people. Okay, people were just killing black people to kill them. Turner got away during the initial siege of the militia. Turner escaped. So he wasn't even part of this execution and killing of all these black people, to the point where a military general had to order his troops and order civilians to quit killing black people. We've killed enough here. Okay? We've seeked enough revenge. Well, Nat Turner eluded a capture for 2 months. Believe it or not, he never left Southampton County, Virginia. and he was able to stay away from capture for 2 months. That's pretty remarkable when you think of it. Well, finally, on October 30th of 1831, October 30th of 1831, a white farmer by the name of Benjamin Phillips discovered Turner, who was in a hole that he covered with fence rails, hiding out on his farm. So on October 30th of 1831, a white farmer named Benjamin Phillips discovered Turner in a hole covered with fence rails. And he was obviously captured and arrested.
Is it Phipps or Phillips?
It's Phipps. Did I have Phillips on that?
Yeah,
Yes,
you
Phipps.
said
P-H-I-P-P-S. Sorry about that. Benjamin Phipps. Well, on November 5th of 1831, Nat Turner was tried. November 5th of 1831, Nat Turner was tried. November 5th, 1831, Nat Turner was tried. And he was tried for conspiracy to rebel, making insurrection. He was tried for, quote, conspiracy to rebel and making insurrection. Insurrection is spelled I-N-S-U-R-R-E-C-T-I-O-N. Conspiracy to rebel and making insurrection. I-N-S-U-R-R-E-C-T-I-O-N. What's another name for insurrection? Anybody know? Revolution. So really, he was tried for conspiracy to rebel and making revolution, although insurrection is the legal term. Well, he was eventually convicted and sentenced to death. He was eventually convicted and sentenced to death. And this is kind of interesting. And when asked if he regretted what he had done, guess what his response was? No, quote, was Christ not crucified? That was his response. When he was asked if he regretted what he had done, he responded, was Christ not crucified? Well, on November 11th of 1831, November 11th of 1831, in Jerusalem, Virginia, ironically, in Jerusalem, Virginia, Nat Turner was hanged. On November 11th, 1831, in Jerusalem, Virginia, Nat Turner was hanged. Now, to show the disdain for this man, after he was hanged, he was flayed, beheaded, and quartered. He was flayed, beheaded, and quartered. In 1967, 31 to 1931, 41, 51, 61, 136 years later, a man by the name of William Styron wrote a book called The Confessions of Nat Turner. 136 years later, in 1967, William Styron wrote this book, Confessions of Nat Turner. 136 years later, this book was so inspirational, it won the 1967 Pulitzer Prize. 1967 Pulitzer Prize. The Confessions of Nat Turner, written by William Styron. Kind of a rare book. In 2017, the book was made into a movie entitled The Birth of a Nation, which is a It's portrayed as a true story, although if you watch it, and I think you should, I can't show it in here because it's a little R-rated because of the violence. But if you're bored and your morals allow you to watch such a movie, if you want to get a good idea of what the slave trade was like and how this fellow lived his life, it would be a good movie to watch, although it's not 100% accurate, just so you know. Pretty close, but not 100%. Okay, that'll take us to our last subtopic of the day, which is the Missouri Compromise. And we're going to have to move back in history a little bit, kind of set the stage for this slavery business. The Missouri Compromise. Now, when's the Civil War start, Andrew Edholm, approximately?
Civil War?
Civil War. Anybody know?
1860.
About 1860, okay, around the 1860. Well, the first real conflict between North and South actually occurred in 1819. And of course, slavery was the issue. And what did it have to do with in 1819 that caused a clash between North and South over the issue of slavery? What did we kind of talk about before we left for Christmas break that we had to, was everybody's concern? Close. What was going on? Very, well, we haven't got a confederacy yet, but you're close. But there was a concern over North and South on the number of free states versus slave states. Well, this controversy actually started in 1819 when Alabama was admitted into the Union, which gave the United States 11 slave states and 11 free states. So this controversy begins in 1819 after Alabama was admitted into the Union. And once Alabama was admitted into the Union, you now had 11 free states and 11 slave states. So each had how many votes in the Senate? How many senators does each state have? 2. So they each had how many votes? 22. So you're thinking, well, what's the conflict there? They're both the same. You're right. But being the subtopic is the Missouri Compromise, what is happening is a clash begins between North and South when Missouri sends in their application to be admitted into the Union because they want to be admitted in as a slave state. And if they let them in, then the balance is 24 votes South, 22 North. That started this conflict that I'm talking about. So, in 1819, after Alabama was admitted into the Union, giving each of the areas 11 states and 22 votes in the Senate, Missouri petitions to be admitted into the Union, and they want to come in as a slave state. And the balance of the power in the Senate would now favor the South, 24 votes to 22. Well, this was going to be a problem, was it not? So what happened on February 13th of 1819, on February 13th of 1819, a member of the House of Representatives by the name of James Talmadge of New York offered a compromise. James Talmadge of New York offered a compromise. So seeing that there was going to be serious conflict between North and South over the admission of Missouri into the Union as a slave state, member of the House of Representatives James Talmadge of New York offered a compromise. And in order for Missouri to come into the Union, here's what had to happen. This is what the Talmadge Amendment stated. What's it amending? It's an amendment to what? What is the Talmadge Amendment an amendment to? Missouri's application to come into the Union as a slave state. Here is a proposal. They would allow Missouri to come in to the Union as a slave state. However, all all Negro children that were born into slavery in Missouri after they became a state would be free on their 25th birthday. So Tallmadge's compromise, or his amendment to the admission of Missouri into the Union as a slave state, is, hey, okay, we'll allow Missouri to come in as a slave state, but any child born in Missouri after their admission into the Union will be free on their 25th birthday. Does that make sense to you?
So, anyone born?
So, anyone born. So, all of a sudden, this is the state of Missouri. Okay? We're all in here. Okay? Rachel and her husband have a baby boy after this particular state has been admitted. When her baby boy reaches 25 years of age, he's free. He's not a slave anymore. That was Tallmadge's proposal. Now, he sent it to Congress, which amounts to what? What are the two branches of Congress? House and Senate. And in order for an amendment to pass, it has to pass both houses of Congress. Well, the House of Representatives adopted the Tallmadge Amendment. They said, yeah, that's a good idea. And they adopted it. However, the Senate rejected it. So we have a standoff here, right? And standoffs sometimes require the C word, compromise. That's the subtopic. So, at this time in history, Congress is in a deadlock over this admission of Missouri into the Union. Well, we're going to have to come up with a compromise. Well, it just so happened that the territory of Maine was petitioning Congress to enter the Union. And what did they want to come in as? Free. Okay? So the Senate said, we'll pass the Tallmadge Amendment, and these are the three things that are going to happen. A, we'll let Missouri come in as a slave state. We'll allow that. And in return, you will have Maine come in as a free state. Pretty good trade, right? You could figure that out. So the compromise was, we'll let Missouri come in as a slave state, but Maine's coming as a free state. Now, they added something that the House had to agree to. Slavery would be prohibited in the Louisiana Purchase north of 3630. So 3630 is right here. So if you take this line here that goes across, we are going to disallow slavery in any of the Louisiana Territory north of 36, right? Anything south of 36 will be slave. Because are those areas states yet? No. So they're trying to set the stage. You see what I mean? That in future states wanting in, that'll already be established which will be which before we start. So the Senate throws this into the Tallmadge Amendment. Maine can be admitted into the Union as a free state. Missouri can be admitted into the Union as a slave state, and slavery is going to be prohibited in the Louisiana Purchase north of latitude 3630. And here's your 36 right here. So this area, this line that comes through here, everything north of that in the Louisiana Purchase would be free. Anything south would be slave. They're trying to get this figured out. Now, what do you think Southern members of Congress, do you think they like that? Why? Well, let's think not about control of Congress, but money. How much cotton are you going to grow north of 3630? Zero. Okay, so they don't care if that land is non-slavery, but they're pretty excited that everything south of 3630 will be automatically slave, because that's where cotton is grown. and they're figuring they're going to grow cotton all the way across here, are they not? Does that make sense? So, Southern members of Congress willingly accepted the compromise because cotton could not be grown profitably on land north of that latitude. Well, does it work pretty well? It's an amendment, but it's also a compromise known as the Missouri Compromise. And what it again stated is that it kept the balance of free and slave states the same, right? What did we have? 12 and 12. Okay, it did that for sure. And it also kind of set the boundary in the future on if these areas want to come into the Union, we've already got the boundary that states what they're going to be. This compromise became known in history as the Missouri Compromise. Now, I want to just finish with this. The issue of balance in the Senate continued. Texas was admitted in 1844, and Florida was admitted in 1845. Both slave states. So at the end of that period of time, by the end of 1945, the South had a 4-vote advantage over the North in the Senate. I'll repeat that. Texas was admitted in 1844, Florida in 1845. They both came into the Union as slave states. Therefore, the balance between the North and South in the Senate favored the South by 2 states. You think the North was going to live with that? So 2 more states came in. One came in 1846 and the other in 1848 that balanced it. Iowa came in 1846 as a free state, and Wisconsin in 1848 as a free state. So by 1848, what do we have? Equal balance.
When was Wisconsin?
What's that? 18